Serenity Valley Stories invites you into the shadows. Like and subscribe for more tales that will haunt your nights. And now our feature presentation, Night of the Unseen. It was supposed to be a quiet drive home, just my wife Sherry and me, the road stretching endlessly through the remote countryside. The sky was a dark, starless void, save for the thin crescent moon that hung low, casting a faint glow over the desolate landscape. We had decided to take the long way back to our small town, hoping to enjoy the tranquility of the night after visiting friends. Little did we know, our peaceful drive would turn into something out of our worst nightmares. I remember the moment it all began, the instant the air around us seemed to shift. The engine's hum faded into the background, and a low, throbbing sound filled the car. Sherry glanced at me, her brow furrowed. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. "Yeah, I do. It's like a pulse." The sound was strange, like nothing I'd ever heard before. It felt alive, resonating deep in my chest, growing louder with each passing second. Then, as suddenly as it started, the pulse stopped, and the world around us went silent. The night, once filled with the chirping of crickets and the rustle of the wind, now felt empty, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. We continued driving, unease settling over us like a heavy blanket. Sherry kept her eyes on the road ahead, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the way she clenched her teeth in that nervous habit she had. My own heart raced, a steady rhythm of anxiety that I couldn't shake. And then we saw it. It appeared on the horizon, a faint light at first, then growing brighter as we approached. At first, I thought it might be a distant farmhouse or a roadside sign, but the light was too intense, too unnatural. It pulsed with that same rhythm we had heard earlier, casting an eerie glow across the barren fields. "What is that?" Sherry asked, her voice trembling now. "I don't know," I replied, slowing the car to a crawl as we drew nearer. The light hovered above the ground, just off the side of the road, illuminating a patch of earth in a strange, cold blue hue. We stopped the car a few hundred feet away, our headlights dim in comparison to the strange light ahead. My pulse quickened as I stared at the object, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was a craft, though not like any aircraft I'd ever seen. Its shape was smooth, almost organic, with no visible seams or edges. It seemed to pulse and throb, alive with an energy that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Sherry reached out and grabbed my arm. "Jake, we should go. This doesn't feel right." I wanted to agree with her, to put the car in reverse and get as far away from that thing as possible. But something held me there, a morbid curiosity that kept my feet rooted to the spot. "We need to know what this is," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If it's dangerous, we should warn someone." She looked at me, fear etched in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew as well as I did that whatever this was, it wasn't normal. We had to find out more. We stepped out of the car, the cool night air biting at our skin as we approached the craft. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself was trying to pull us back. The light from the craft was blinding up close, forcing us to shield our eyes as we moved nearer. When we were just a few feet away, the air around us grew thick, almost suffocating. My breathing became shallow, each inhale a struggle. I glanced at Sherry and saw her clutching her chest, her face pale with fear. And then, without warning, the craft emitted a low, rumbling sound, and a door, or what I assumed was a door, began to open. A wave of cold air rushed out, bringing with it a smell that made my stomach turn. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before, a mix of burnt metal and decay. "Jake, we have to go." Sherry's voice was shrill, panic finally breaking through her calm exterior. But it was too late. As the door opened fully, something stepped out. My blood ran cold as I saw the figure emerge from the shadows inside the craft. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed too long, too slender, for its body. Its skin was a sickly gray, slick and smooth, with no features except for a pair of large, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light around them. I froze, unable to move, unable to think. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment, I felt a wave of terror unlike anything I'd ever known. It wasn't just fear, it was something deeper, something primal, as if every cell in my body was screaming at me to run, to get as far away from that thing as possible. But my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, trapped in its gaze. The creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate, almost as if it was savoring the moment. Sherry grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. It was as if the creature had me in its thrall, holding me in place with nothing more than a look. And then it smiled, or at least, I think it did. Its lips, if you could call them that, curled back to reveal rows of sharp, glistening teeth. The sight jolted me back to reality, and suddenly, I could move again. I grabbed Sherry's hand, and we turned and ran, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the silent night. We bolted back to the car, but as we reached it, another figure appeared from the darkness, blocking our path. This one was smaller, but no less terrifying. Its eyes were the same, empty voids that seemed to pull the light from the world around it. Panic surged through me as I realized we were surrounded. There was no way out, no escape. I glanced at Sherry, seeing the same fear mirrored in her eyes. "Get in the car!" I shouted, shoving her towards the driver's side. She scrambled to open the door, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the handle. I turned back towards the creatures, my heart pounding in my chest. They were moving closer, their movements slow but deliberate, as if they knew we had nowhere to go. Finally, Sherry managed to get the door open, and we both dove inside, slamming the doors shut behind us. I fumbled for the keys, my hands slick with sweat, and jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I threw the car into reverse, spinning the tires as we tore away from the creatures. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The fear of seeing those eyes again was too much to bear. I kept my focus on the road, on getting as far away from that place as possible. Sherry was beside me, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, the only sound the hum of the engine and the pounding of my heart in my ears. It wasn't until we were miles away, with no sign of pursuit, that I finally allowed myself to breathe. What were those things?" Sherry whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my own voice shaking. "But whatever they were, we need to tell someone. The authorities, the military, anyone who can deal with something like this." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "Do you think they'll believe us?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Everything we had just experienced felt like a bad dream, a twisted nightmare that we couldn't wake up from. But the fear, the terror that still clung to me like a second skin, was all too real. As we drove on, the road stretching endlessly ahead, a sense of unease settled over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that those creatures, whatever they were, weren't done with us yet. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a flash of light in the rearview mirror. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced back, expecting to see those dark, empty eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing. Just the empty road behind us, bathed in the pale light of the moon. I turned my attention back to the road, but the fear remained, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Because deep down, I knew that whatever we had encountered that night, it wasn't something that could be outrun. It wasn't something that could be forgotten. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that it would come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, it would return. And this time, we might not be so lucky. Thank you for watching Serenity Valley Stories. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another scary tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below.